This is CBC Here and Now.
Next weather maker moves in tomorrow night through Wednesday. This is going to bring some snow, even some freezing rain, and some rain on the way.
Oh, take a look at this, my man, take a look.
A drunk driving case is thrown out. The man accused of impaired driving in a crash that killed two is acquitted.
Shut it all down. They left their families to work for us, while we stayed safe at home.
The province's largest union launches its own campaign, saying it won't accept job losses as a solution to the financial crisis.
Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. I'm Peter Cowan.
And I'm Jane Adey, sitting in for Carolyn Stokes.
A 22-year-old who was accused of drunk driving causing death is a free man tonight. Nicholas Villeneuve was acquitted on all 8 charges this morning in provincial court after the Crown conceded there was no chance of a conviction. Here Now's Garrett Berry has the details tonight.
Nicholas Villeneuve walked out of the courthouse a free man, but on his way out, he was confronted by this crowd.
There you go, there you go. There you go, take a look at this, my man, take a look. Take a look.
This crowd had assembled before the hearing, asking, what about the victims? John and Sandra Lush were killed in the crash, and their daughter Suzanne had serious injuries. They were in an SUV that was struck in July 2019 on this stretch of road near Gander. And there was a fourth person in the car, Joshua Whiteway. The accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. He was in the courtroom this morning and heard the charges dismissed. Villeneuve was facing 8 charges, but the case against him fell apart. Several pieces of evidence were excluded last month, and today the Crown admitted even more evidence would have to be tossed out. Because of a publication ban, we can't tell you exactly why, or give you the specifics on that evidence. But the decision means Judge Mark Linehan was satisfied that Villeneuve's charter rights were violated. And because the Crown couldn't use those pieces of evidence, it admitted to the judge it had no reasonable chance of getting a guilty verdict. Whiteway posted a letter on Facebook after the hearing, calling the dismissal a joke, writing, "What about our rights? The right to exist without someone killing you, or running into you and leaving you near dead on the side of the road."
Lawyers for both sides declined to speak with us today, but the Crown Attorney's Office did say it has 30 days to file an appeal and will review the file and those pre-trial decisions within that time frame. Garrett Berry, CBC News, Gander.
Mothers Against Drunk Driving is reacting to today's court decision. The past president of Mad Canada's from this province, Patricia Hines-Coates, says in outcomes like today, victims can feel there's no justice.
What this family must be going through, the heartache, the devastation, I have to relive this every day and find that there was just no justice, has to be destroying them both inside and out.
Now, Hines-Coates says MAD has been working to make it possible for victims to sue alleged impaired drivers. You can see Jane's interview with her in 20 minutes on Here and Now.
It's been fairly quiet. It was a quiet weekend. We did see this area of low pressure affecting our weather with anywhere really along the northeast coast, seeing some flurries or freezing drizzle through most of the afternoon. But you know what the good news is that low heads off as we head through the night tonight. So the flurries that are happening from pretty much Bonavista north through to the Avalon will end as we head through the overnight, looking like a quiet first half of tomorrow. And then this area of low pressure making its way along the Atlantic coast is going to head our way as we head through tomorrow night into Wednesday afternoon. It's going to bring some messy weather with it. Environment Canada has issued a special weather statement for the majority of all of Newfoundland, southeastern portions of Labrador. Already issued some wind warnings. Winds are going to ramp up tomorrow night. Some easterly winds gusting upwards of 110 to as much as 150 kilometers per hour in the Rec House area. So it's going to be a windy next 24 hours. And again, we've got some snow starting, changing over to some freezing rain, even some rain as we head into Wednesday. But I will break all of that down for you coming up.
Thanks, Ashley. Well, Labrador Grenfell Health is temporarily postponing vaccinations for the elderly. This after Moderna announced nationwide decreases in deliveries of its COVID-19 vaccine. Vaccination for those 75 and older have originally been scheduled to begin next week. The health authority says it's rescheduling and following provincial and national guidance on vaccination for priority populations. More information is expected in the coming weeks. There are 13 active cases of COVID-19 in the province. No new cases were announced today. While we know that 5 of those cases are connected to last week's cluster, public health is still working to trace the initial source of infection, the case that began it all. As part of that investigation, anyone who visited or worked at the following locations should call 811 to arrange testing. Anyone who was at the Duke of Duckworth in St. John's on Wednesday, January 20th, between the hours of 3:30 p.m. and closing. Anyone at the Rose and Thistle Pub on Wednesday, January 20th from 4:30 p.m. to closing. And anyone at Pietro Pizzeria on Friday, January 22nd, between 6 o'clock p.m. and closing. If that applies to you, arrange a COVID test. You should also isolate while waiting for the results.
Now to the election. The province's largest public sector union is drawing a line in the sand, serving notice that it will not stand for big cuts as the province tries to deal with a punishing financial crisis. And as Terry Roberts reports, NAPE is sparing no expense to get its message across.
The voice.
We called them heroes.
The pictures. This highly produced advertisement, released today, intended to remind people of the importance of public servants.
When COVID shut it all down, they left their families to work for us, while we stayed.
And that their union is ready to fight.
And we will do everything we can, protect the service they provide and the people providing those services.
NAPE represents thousands of government workers, and with the threat of deep cuts hanging over everyone's heads, the union is going on the offensive.
It is not the frontline workers that got us in this problem. It's not the arrows that have gotten us through this pandemic that are the problem.
This PR campaign is in response to the Premier's Economic Recovery Task Force, chaired by this woman, Moya Green, a top-to-bottom review of government, a report to be released at the end of this month, after voters go to the polls to elect a new government.
Those decisions cannot be made in the back rooms by such people as Moya Green, and we know her track record. It's been quite clear.
Green is a high-profile international business leader with a history of privatization. Jerry Earle says he's willing to sit down with government and talk about ways through this fiscal quagmire, but he's not willing to sit back and let decisions be made in some back room. He says worker morale is sagging, and that some of the signals being sent are only making the situation worse.
And then when they air comments from groups like the Newfoundland and Labrador Employers Council, when they air Moya Green's comments and know our track record, and unfortunately even comments of the Premier when he said sometimes you got to cut off a limb, well, our members feel like that limb. They're not expendable.
They kept our schools clean.
Earle says this is just phase 1 of NAPE's campaign, that significant resources will be brought to bear. The fact this is all happening during an election, just a coincidence, he says.
It is impossible to cut our way to prosperity.
But political parties were quick to react.
And I strongly believe that we need to invest in a robust public service, and cutting will not get us to prosperity.
There are other ways of managing the size of the public service if it's decided that adjustments are needed.
Chess Crosby says the PCs will focus on early retirement incentives to downsize the public sector. Liberal leader Andrew Furey was not available for questions today, but party officials emphasized once again that Moya Green's report will be fully debated and that there are no plans for mass layoffs. Terry Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
With less than 2 weeks left in the campaign, the Liberals, the NDP, and the PCs continued to make promises today. For the Liberals, it was building an inclusive future, while the PCs focused on population and job growth. The NDP, well, they want to try and stop CERB clawbacks. Here now's Jeremy Eaton breaks down the details for you.
Just steps from St. John's Harbour, PC party leader Chess Crosby told the media and faithful Facebook watchers that he wants to put an end to people and jobs leaving our shores.
Look, we got to try something different. What we've been trying in the past has not been working. It's time to try something different. I'm offering the public of Newfoundland and Labrador something different, a jobs and growth strategy.
Crosby says since 2016, under Liberal leadership, an estimated 10,000 people have left the province. His party plans to put its support behind an IVF clinic to try and grow the population. Tax breaks are also an offer the PCs hope will keep young people here.
We will keep more young people here by establishing a graduate retention program that provides a tax credit to a maximum of $20,000 when post-secondary graduates choose to stay and work in this province.
Growth was also on the Liberals' agenda today. Crosby's opponent in Windsor Lake, John Hogan, announced his party's plan, tripling the immigration target to address an aging and shrinking population.
We want to work with newcomers here, see what they need, what they want to feel comfortable here, and it includes things like what sports do they like to do, what food do they like to eat, what's important to them in their communities so they can get together and be happy here.
Tripling the number of immigrants moves it from 1,700 a year to more than 5,000.
Absolutely, there's a demand and a want to come to Newfoundland and Labrador. Of course, there's going to be a cost. There's always a cost with any government program, but I think it's a program that we can't afford not to do. Like I said, population decrease is a huge problem here.
While the other parties push for population growth, the NDP called for an end to the CERB clawback.
And let's be honest, those on income support, they're not taking trips to Florida. They're trying to put food on the table for themselves and for their children. And they're trying to make sure the house stays heated, and they're trying to make sure that the furniture is looked after and they put clothes in the backs of their children.
The NDP called the CERB process complicated for those on income support and feel it's an unfair hardship to come asking for it to be paid back.
The clawback can add to the burden to the healthcare system and has surely cost the provincial government more in the long run, and it will cost them more in the long run.
And while the parties had a lot of answers today, there wasn't much in the way of details, including what's all of this going to cost. Jeremy Eaton, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, keeping with those party promises, the three political parties haven't released their full platforms yet, but voters may get a little more of a sense of where they stand in a series of upcoming debates. Here now's Heather Gillis joins us live from the newsroom. So Heather, what are we expecting over the next couple of days?
Well, Peter, it's debate week. So tonight what we're expecting is a debate focused on education with the leaders hosted by teachers. Tomorrow it's the Federation of Labor. Liberal leader Andrew Furey won't be at that one though. And then on Wednesday, the leaders are going to square off at the House of Assembly. Tonight, teachers will host a virtual leaders debate with Liberal leader Andrew Furey, PC leader Ches Crosby, and NDP leader Alison Coffin, moderated by political scientist Kelly Bladuc. NLTA President Dean Ingram says the leaders will be asked 6 questions. He wants a commitment to investing in education, things like smaller class sizes and a review of the number of teachers allocated to schools promised a decade ago.
We need to look towards providing a needs-based education system. We need to address student needs. Right now, regrettably, in many cases, we do not have a needs-based system. We have a budget-based system. And you try and get your needs to match the budgets there.
The province is in a dire financial situation. $16.4 billion in net debt, a $1.8 billion deficit in the last budget, and it spends more on debt than education. Still, Ingram isn't backing down on fighting for his funding.
I would suggest that the question isn't so much as that can you afford to, as that can we afford not to. I would suggest that sometimes the question isn't so much about how much money you have to spend, it's about how you choose to spend the money you do have.
The Liberal leader is skipping the Federation of Labor's online debate tomorrow night, with St. John's West candidate Siobhan Cody filling his shoes. President Mary Shortall, who quit the Premier's economic recovery team last month, calling it window dressing without transparency, is disappointed that Furey won't be there.
I'm not sure what kind of message that sends out to our members.
Still, she says the show will go on because the workers she represents want answers.
So they're concerned about unemployment and jobs. They're concerned about health and safety issues, particularly around COVID, but in general as well. There's been concerns about the minimum wage, about privatization.
And of course, on Wednesday, that debate with the leaders is going to be at the House of Assembly. CBC is going to have that full debate live after Here and Now. That'll be 7 o'clock Island time. Jane?
Thanks, Heather. That's Here and Now's Heather Gillis. Well, while we wait for those party platforms, we do know about some of their differences thanks to CBC Vote Compass. The three main parties have provided details about some key issues like access to rural hospitals, minimum wage, and taxation. Should rural hospitals be kept open even if it means higher taxes? Well, the Liberals somewhat disagree, saying they want to focus on innovations like virtual care. The NDP somewhat agrees. The PC strongly agrees, saying closing rural hospitals is not the PC approach. When it comes to oil and gas promotion, how much should the province be doing to promote new oil and gas development? The NDP says much less, the Liberals say about the same, and the PCs say they will drive growth in the oil and gas sector with more development. And when it comes to the minimum wage, the parties are split, with the NDP wanting big increases up to $15 an hour, the Liberals wanting a small increase, and the PCs wanting to keep it about the same. And if you want to read more statements from the parties or just see how your views align with those of the party, you can check out Vote Compass. It's at votecompass.cbc.ca. There was a little more activity at Memorial University today. Most of the staff who work at the St. John's campus are back working on site. And as Cease Hare reports, for many, it's the first time in a long time.
Return to work for staff doesn't mean a full return to normal. The hallways and tunnels and lobbies in the university lack the normal hustle and bustle.
Doesn't really feel that much different. It's a little different with no students around, not quite as busy.
Not as busy because most of MUN's 15,000 students who normally show up on campus daily are taking courses online. Oregon's first full physical day back looks different, with hand sanitizing stations everywhere, plexiglass partitions in some offices, and contact tracing log sheets for visitors.
I feel relatively safe. I feel as safe here as if I was going to Costco or the mall.
QP Local 1615, which represents the vast majority of non-academic staff at MUN, says 700 of their 800 members are back today.
The only people who wouldn't be on campus now are those who have medical accommodations that were necessary, or those whose departments, they've got a pilot project to continue working from home. So some departments have approved to continue to work from home.
This is not administration's first try to get staff back. A plan to do it in November was dropped due to a sudden uptick in cases leading towards Christmas.
We didn't want to bring staff back too close to the post-winter break because we were concerned that there may in fact be a second wave associated with that, and so in an abundance of caution we wanted to have a good gap between when we brought our staff back and when the winter break ended, just to be comfortable that we are in a reasonably good place, and so that's why we picked February 1st.
Abraham says this is a step in moving the university back to normal operations, but there's still a long way to go. The next step is to see if they can safely let a few thousand students back on campus for the spring session. Cease Hare, CBC News, St. John's.
Team Smith and Team Hill are provincial curling champions. Both won their respective tournaments this weekend at the Remax Centre in St. John's. 8 men's teams competed in the round robin, with Greg Smith's rink coming out on top, while skip Sarah Hill led her team to a 7-6 win. Both will move on to national tournaments in Calgary later this winter. Team Guju will also compete in Calgary after winning last year's Brier.
Well, from tournaments that are going ahead to races that are not, Cane's Quest 2022 has been canceled. The new official start date is going to be March 2023. Organizers behind the 3,000-kilometer snowmobile race say the pandemic has left too many things in limbo. Cane's Quest is billed as one of the toughest and longest races of its kind, and as such, organizers say it takes a full year to plan. They say bumping the date by a year will give racers and themselves plenty of time to map things out safely.
Well, there's a live look outside the studio. A pretty lovely evening. We're going to say goodbye to some minus single-digit temperatures as we head through the week. I'll have those details coming up.
This weather forecast is brought to you by Newfoundland and Labrador Tourism. Somewhere out there is a winter with your name on it. Find it now at stayhomeyear.ca.
Welcome back to Here and Now. We're going to talk about the weather now. Ashley, I know there's some messy stuff coming in the next couple of days, but you're going to start with some really mild temperatures last night, right?
It was mild. It was mild and it has been mild really for the last through January and then even into December. But yeah, temperatures were only around -4 last night. Let's take a look at those numbers here in St. John's. But it wasn't so mild for Labrador. -21 was the morning low for Happy Valley Goose Bay and -31 for Lab City. Unfortunately, we're not going to see too much of a change in those overnight lows. This is where we sat, so it actually rebounded beautifully this afternoon. Highs into the minus single digits across the board. And if we take a look at the current satellite and radar, you can see that area of low pressure that was affecting our weather for most of the weekend. That's finally moved off, and the flurries that were happening for northern portions, it's not showing up too much on the satellite radar, but that will end as we head through the overnight tonight. Taking a look at the future tracker, it'll take that cloud cover right along with it, and then we'll see mainly clear skies through the overnight tonight and some generally light winds for most of the island, and that is going to lead to a fairly cool night tonight. Those winds are going to stay brisk into the east, so northwesterlies gusting anywhere from 30 to 50 kilometers per hour. So our lows will likely sit into the minus single digits from essentially Bonavista North through to the Avalon. Otherwise, dipping into the minus double digits. Grand Falls winds are -18 tonight, certainly in those low-lying areas. Another cool night for Lab City with generally light winds, -31 tonight, and then you're looking at temperatures into the minus teens for the rest of the Big Land. Taking a look at the future tracker for tomorrow, it's going to be a very relatively quiet start to the day tomorrow with some sunshine. Then we'll start to see some increasing cloud, and that's thanks to that area of low pressure that I've been talking about. That's going to move in as we head into the afternoon around supper hours when we'll probably see that snow start. It'll spread north and east into the overnight and eventually transition to rain for southwestern portions of the island as we head into the early morning hours, and we'll see that pretty much along the south coast as well. And then that snow will continue to spread towards the northern peninsula and southeastern Labrador into the early morning hours on Wednesday. As far as tomorrow's forecast goes, temperatures will be below zero, and this will be the last day that we'll see temperatures below zero for the majority of the week for the island. You'll see, like I said, that snow move in. Winds to start will be easterlies 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. Then they're going to ramp up as that area of low pressure continues to move in. Cool but calm for Labrador, -11 for Happy Valley Goose Bay and -13 for Nain, and we'll see those winds easing in the east tomorrow. So it will be a fairly nice day. But that area of low pressure is already prompting the warnings, the wind warning, wreckhouse wind warning in effect. You're going to see gusts upwards of 150 kilometers per hour. Again, that's tomorrow night through Wednesday morning, with areas certainly in easterly flow. Rather, we're going to see the wind warnings. Your wind warnings will be somewhere between 100 and 110 kilometers per hour. And again, that will be Tuesday night through Wednesday morning. So here's a look at Wednesday morning. There's a little bit of things to iron out with this system still, depending on the track. But right now, this is a pretty good indication of what will happen. We will see a transition through to ice pellets or freezing rain, and then quickly through to rain as we head through the day on Wednesday. And that's because temperatures are going to bump up well above zero for most. It's going to stay as snow mainly for most of the northern peninsula as well as southeastern Labrador. It'll take a little while for your transition to happen. It'll probably happen Wednesday evening and through the overnight through Wednesday, and then we're going to stay in this southerly flow as we head through Thursday. So here's an early look at what I'm thinking as far as snowfall totals go. Northern peninsula, the Big Land, you're looking at anywhere from 10 to 20 centimeters of snow. This will take us through to Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. Southeastern Labrador and the northern peninsula is the best chance where we'll see mainly snow. 30 plus centimeters at this point looks likely, briefly mixing with ice pellets and or freezing rain, and then you'll pick up a couple millimeters of rain. The majority of the rain will fall along the south coast. You'll see 5, maybe 10 centimeters of snow. Again, some things to iron out before you transition through to rain, but you could pick up anywhere from 15 to 25 millimeters of rain, and then for the rest of the island, about 5 to 15 centimeters of snow. again mixing with ice pellets at times and maybe a brief period of freezing rain, and then over to rain. About 5 to 15 millimeters of rain looks likely. The other thing with this is the winds. Talked about southwestern portions of the island already into Wednesday morning. The winds pick up through the day as you head further east. We could see widespread gusts of 80 to 100 kilometers per hour through the day on Wednesday. And then there's your temperatures. Like I mentioned, well above zero. Marystown potentially reaching the double digits, 11 degrees, 7 to 9 degrees for the rest, and then hanging on to your temperatures below zero for the northern peninsula, which is why you're going to stay mainly as snow. And then another day on Thursday into the single digits, and that's the story as we head through Friday and Saturday as well, above zero. So it's looking like we're going to see rain, might mix in with some snow on Saturday in eastern areas, but then for central and western Newfoundland, you're going to see your temperatures dip back down. So either rain or snow to round out the week. And then for Labrador, you're looking at temperatures hovering around the 0 degree mark for eastern areas, and then well above where you should be sitting in western Labrador into the minus single digits as well. So I wanted to share this stunning sunset in Nain, talking about the Big Land. Wilson shared this one with us, and if you have any weather photos, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Welcome back to Here and Now. Let's go back to our top story this evening. In 2019, John and Sandra Lush were killed in a highway accident. Their daughter had serious injuries. The fourth person in the car was left paralyzed from the waist down. A 22-year-old was accused of drunk driving causing death, but Nicholas Villeneuve is free tonight. He was acquitted on all 8 charges this morning because the case against him fell apart. Evidence had to be thrown out, and the judge in the case decided Villeneuve's charter rights were violated. Patricia Hines-Coates is the local president of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and she joins me now. Patricia, first of all, I'd like to get your reaction to the acquittal in this case today.
It's devastating. You know, right now there's no justice for the families or for the victims. As you were speaking, I had chills. I am devastated. I can only imagine what I would have felt if this had been the outcome of Nicholas's case. However, you know, there's 2 people who have lost their lives, and 2 people who are seriously injured, and it's heartbreaking and it's tragic and it's devastating. You know, we just hope that there will be some accountability, that there will be some changes in the future that will stop the outcome that happened today.
You lost your stepson to a drunk driver in 2013, so I know you can speak very personally to this. How hard is something like this on families?
It's beyond devastating. Words cannot describe the heartache and the pain that a family feels when they lose someone to an impaired driving crash in such a tragic and unpreventable way. What this family must be going through, the heartache, the devastation, I have to relive this every day and find that there was just no justice, has to be destroying them both inside and out.
Do victims have any recourse after an acquittal like this?
That's a good question. I mean, you can appeal if possible, and you can go civilly against the impaired driver. But for us at MAD, we will be there to support them as families who have lost a loved one. We know the devastation, so we will be there to help them if they want our help, and they have reached out to our Gander chapter. But all we can do now for us with the organization is dig our heels in and try to make change. This is why my husband and I have been involved in public policy since the day we buried Nicholas. It's because changes have to be made. This is one more loophole, one more injustice that has happened that needs to change. So we need to dig our heels in and find a way to close these loopholes so that there will be no more cases like this in the future.
Just as we finish up now, obviously the message still isn't getting through to a lot of people. What would be the very first change you would make in this province?
That's a good question. For me, right now I'm working on changes to the legislation for the civil aspect, the Fatal Accident Act. I've been working with the government to make changes so that it is more inclusive. But right now we need to make sure we close these loopholes. There's no explanation, no justification for what happened today. And I know there's things that we don't know. We don't know the full process. We don't know all the details, but we need to find out what happened and we need to prevent it. So for us, with MAD, the organization, we'll be looking at this very closely, and we will work with the provincial and federal government to try to prevent this from happening, provided they're willing to make these changes. And we have to always remember, we have to uphold the Charter of Rights, because that is one of the things that does need to be altered, but it needs to be altered to be more inclusive and make sure that we cover all aspects so that we protect people in the future. Impaired driving is still rampant in our province, in our country. It has to stop. People need to start remembering they need to be accountable for what they're doing. If you choose to use drugs, you choose to use alcohol, that's your choice, but don't get behind the wheel. Driving is a privilege, it's not a right, and we need to all be accountable for what we're doing.
Patricia Hines-Coates, local president of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, I want to thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's debate week. The big debate is going to be Wednesday night at 7 p.m., aired right here on CBC. But that's not the only one. The teachers are holding an event tonight. It's Labor's turn tomorrow. So will this bring out some of the big ideas that our political watchers have been waiting for? Well, let's find out. Hassan Hai is a former Liberal candidate. Caitlin Urquhart is a lawyer and volunteers with the NDP. And Gillian Pearson, a former PC candidate. So, Gillian, let's start with you. What do you want to see out of the debates this week?
So I think what a lot of political watchers want to see is more substantial positions on some broad and also nuanced issues. I personally would have liked to see these three debates earlier on in the election campaign. We're over halfway, and on the ground, I've been hearing, a lot of folks are saying, well, we don't really know what's going on. There's not a whole lot to talk about. So I think voters and political watchers are going to get a better sense of where each party stands and the ways and the styles of different leadership moving forward.
Great points. I would say the technical definition of this election is maybe a nothing burger election. Not to say that there's no issues, but nothing's really substantially being talked about, or that's the perception. So it absolutely would have been great to have some more substantial debates and maybe even platform drops come out earlier. So I think right now people are really excited to really cut to the meat of like what's going on, how do the parties really differentiate? And there's less than 2 weeks left. Like what are we basing our votes on here?
And we have to remember local candidates have been campaigning for probably more than 2 weeks. And to kind of keep everything vague, that's really not helping them out from any party on the door because they don't have a whole lot of substantial positions to either bring forward or defend. So that's difficult on the local perspective.
I'm absolutely looking forward to the debates. I think I would concur with Gillian and Hassan that really we have some serious issues to talk about in this election. We have an economy on the brink. We have demographic crisis. We have, a huge, the largest labor pay gap, gender pay gap in the country. We have some of the highest rates of domestic violence in the country. We have an ongoing pandemic. We have rotational workers that haven't seen their families for almost a year now. There's these absolutely acute crises happening across our province, and we haven't heard anything about any of these issues. I mean, this week we're finally starting to hear a bit about folks' positions around minimum wage, which is a start, and we may have differing opinions on that, but really one where we're talking about these essential workers, grocery workers and cleaners and people who are living at the lowest possible wages, well below living wage, and finally hearing about what the party's platforms are on that. I'm really looking forward to St. John Status Women Council's debate on February 8th. I think that collectively sort of these series of debates will help us to actually get a sense of what the leaders are thinking. And then I think that supports also these incredible local candidates to actually have something to say on the doors, because it's very hard when you're hamstrung by your party's position on certain issues.
All three of you seem kind of frustrated by this, but when you look at the polling, we saw the latest poll from the campaign shows Liberals with 62%, PC's well behind with 26%, and then the NDP well back behind that. So if that really, we're seeing that level of support from parties that you guys are frustrated haven't really come out with more to say, isn't that strategy kind of working then, at least for the Liberals?
I think from a political perspective, it's a smart strategy, but just because you can do it doesn't mean it's right. I can't personally stand and support a party or a government who calls an election looking for a mandate, and then they don't really want to divulge to the electorate what exactly their plans are. The opposition, their role in the legislature is actually to hold government to account, and you can't do that if you don't know what their plans are.
Absolutely. And I think that it also makes the candidates themselves so much more important, right? Like what we've sort of seen is this shift away because the parties aren't saying anything. So people are really having to do their research into the local candidates. And we've been so fortunate in that we have these incredible candidates who put their names forward. And I think people are going to have to look at who's running in their district and get a sense of who those people are, what their values are, how they align or don't align, and vote much more based on the candidate than based on the party, because really there's just no meat on the bones to what the parties are putting forward so far. So.
And I think too, with new candidates, particularly those who've been, incumbents and years in politics, they've established themselves. People know what their views are. I mean, parties don't shift dramatically election cycle over election cycle, but new people, even though they're known in the community, without them knowing exactly where their party stands, and I know particularly, even having been a former candidate, sometimes we find out when the public does what the platform is, maybe a minute before. So not having that puts a lot of pressure on new candidates who, like you said, are at the door and they're asked questions. It's like, well, I can give you my opinion, but if that varies, either you take the safe bet and say, well, you waffle a little bit and hopefully you find out what the party's doing, or you do what humans do, and particularly really active new candidates do. It's like, hey, here's how I feel, and I don't know what the party's going to do, but that isn't setting a candidate up for long-term success when you're having to then backtrack on or answer to when your party takes a very different path than what maybe your heart wanted. So it's not a great situation.
I think the polls also reflect the fact that the only thing that a lot of people can evaluate the Liberals on is their pandemic response. And as we know, it's no secret that a lot of Newfoundland and Labrador are happy with the way that the pandemic was handled. What else can they evaluate them on when they're asked, would they support them? So I just think from this perspective and the way that we are suppressing these platforms is a way to keep voters disengaged and have less information to evaluate the parties on. And I don't think that's good.
I think that, at the end of the day, voters only have so many choices. So they may be holding their noses right now and saying, regardless of what they're going to pick, they may not be entirely happy with it, but they didn't have a great selection. And I don't mean as far as the quality of candidates or even the parties themselves, but really without that disclosure broadly across all parties, without having that, like, voters may not be even happy with the choices that they make. And so what a great world it would be in if voters actually had all the data they needed early in an election cycle to say, hey, here's everything that's important to me. Here's everything that's important to this province. Let me make an informed decision.
That would be the dream.
Right?
I think it's also important to realize that there's only so creative and bold and visionary you can be when we are literally on the brink of financial ruin, and we're not talking about that. So I hope each party has some courage this week and next week to say, you know what, there's some difficult information that we are going to have to communicate that to you in the next coming weeks, months, year. And here's the possible solutions, because we're pretty in the dark right now.
Well, we'll see if the debates this week shed any more light on it. Thank you very much, all three of you, for weighing in today.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
We never had a grasp on the seriousness of the situation.
I went through really bad post-traumatic stress.
If someone stared, I'd say, would you like to ask me what happened?
We check back in with people who have faced some major life challenges.
It was a transplant coordinator saying, we've got a kidney for you, and you got to get to Halifax.
It gets frustrating at times, but like anything, everyone has challenges in life.
This is my story. Stay tuned for new episodes on Here and Now.
And this is my story.
Welcome back to Here and Now. International travelers arriving at Toronto's Pearson Airport now have to be tested for COVID-19, and the federal government is expected to put hotel quarantine requirements in place as early as Thursday. According to one expert, quarantine works.
If you want to prevent new viral strains from getting into the country, there's a very easy way to do it. You get everybody who comes into the country to quarantine for 2 weeks, and then you have no new variants coming into the country. It really is that straightforward. And as long as we can do that and do that effectively and make sure that 2-week quarantines are respected, we will be okay in that respect.
Ottawa is also in talks with the U.S. over potential new safety measures at land ports of entry. The travel restrictions come amid a temporary slowdown of vaccines from Canada's 2 approved manufacturers, Pfizer and Moderna. Black History Month starts today, acknowledging and celebrating the contributions of Black Canadians. This year, a new construction organization is launching. The Afro-Canadian Contractors Association wants to break down barriers for Black contractors, especially after several racist incidents were reported at Toronto construction sites last year. Marivelle Taruk has more.
Sefton Spence heads up his own construction firm, a rare Black-owned business in a massive construction industry.
You know the industry's large. We're looking about $354 billion this year. And the percentage of Black contractors at such levels is so minute.
It's one of the reasons behind the formation of the Afro-Canadian Contractors Association, or ACA.
This is where we can work with the Black contractors, trying to hire more Black kids and Indigenous kids and to get into the system so that everyone is more visible.
ACA officially launches February 1st, the start of Black History Month, in part a way to combat anti-Black racism in the wake of the George Floyd killing last summer. Then a number of nooses were found on various construction sites in Toronto. Spence, who's the vice president of ACA, spent 3 decades building his business. He recalls bidding on a major contract.
The CEO comes out and he says to the secretary, "Is Spence here yet?" And I've been sitting there for half an hour already, but they don't know that it's me.
We're at a tipping point right now, not just in the construction industry, but in the society as a whole.
Richard White has worked his way up in the industry. He's a chief estimator for Ellis Dawn. It was at a couple of Ellis Dawn sites where nooses were found. The company called the incidents disgraceful.
It's not going to be Black people that are going to fix this problem by themselves. It's going to be the entire industry, and the entire industry really has to want to fix the problem.
Besides advocacy, ACA also aims to provide Black contractors opportunities that they traditionally haven't had access to, including mentorship and access to capital.
We're here to teach them, to educate them, and to develop them to that point where they now can be majors in the construction industry.
Well, thanks to the CBC's Marivelle Taruk for that story. Turning now to international news, Myanmar's military has seized control in a coup against the newly elected government, dealing a blow to the Southeast Asian nation's fragile and short-lived progress towards democracy. The country's top civilian leaders were detained during early morning raids. News of the coup was announced through military-controlled media. Even as many saw their internet and mobile services disrupted, tensions have been high ever since last November's election, during which Suu Kyi's Democratic Party won by a landslide. The civilian ruling party was set to begin a new parliament session today.
Canada's current ambassador to the United Nations has previously served as our special envoy to Myanmar, and while Bob Rae sees the unfolding situation as both challenging and unpredictable, he says the army has always played a critical role in the country formerly known as Burma.
We're opposed to a military attempting to reassert their power or, fortify their power. And we want to see steps taken to protect constitutional democracy and the rule of law, which means protecting the civil liberties of everyone, including the Rohingya, including all those other minority groups that are facing such difficulty in their conflicts with the army and the government.
The year the outport of Lon had way more codfish than it could possibly handle. An archival special, Sunday at noon and Monday at 7.
On your street.
Calling all kids. We're looking to share your stories for our new segment, On Your Street. Interview your pet, show us how to make your favorite snack, or give us a tour of your favorite place. The options are endless. For all the details and to submit your video, head to cbc.ca/NL and click on the Community tab.
Welcome back to Here and Now. Ashley, you're going to give us a little review of what we can expect.
Yeah, tomorrow looks fairly nice to start. We will see some increasing cloud, but let's take a look at the temperatures tomorrow. Plenty of sunshine, winds easing in the east, should sit around -2 for St. John's. Similar temperatures across the board, even above 0 for parts of the west coast. And we will see that increasing cloud, like I said, as we head through the afternoon. As far as Labrador goes, you're looking at temperatures into the minus double digits, plenty of sunshine and generally light winds as well. So a beautiful start to your Tuesday. But then we get into the next weather maker. Tuesday night into Wednesday is when we're going to see that. This is an early indication right now, but it looks like some snow to start and then transitioning to rain through the day for most of the island. Northern Peninsula is where we'll see most of the snow and then change over to some rain or drizzle into the afternoon. And then this will be a mainly snow event for most of Labrador. Anywhere from 10 to 20 centimeters possible. And then southeastern portions, that's where you're going to see the 30 plus centimeters. And again, through that transition, we could see some ice pellets and maybe even a few periods of freezing rain at this point.
Oh, good. The Newfoundland and Labrador sampler. We get a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything on this one, yeah. And the other thing to note is the strong winds as well.
Oh, good. That wasn't enough to have rain and snow. We also had to have some strong winds. Thanks for that, Ashley.
Yeah.
And thanks to Jane for filling in tonight. You're going to see a whole lot more of Jane because she's going to be here on election night as well. And we have to get ready because we're also going to be participating in the debate on Wednesday night.
Coming up Wednesday night, we're getting our questions ready. Right, Peter?
Yeah, I'd give everyone a hint, but we can't have the leaders knowing the questions in advance. You know, how will we know how they do on the test if they get the questions in advance? So it'll be a surprise to them and a surprise to you, so hopefully you can tune in Wednesday night.
Okay, thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.